Negative. That puts me over open ground, no cover. I'm taking the river slit.
Light a death trap, Kane.
The call hit at 4:42 in the afternoon. Not some half-assed drill, not a simulation to keep the brass happy, but the real deal, a gut punch of a moment that makes your hands go cold. Out in the middle of nowhere, where the Arizona sun bakes the sand to glass, a convoy was tearing through Coyote's Jaw Pass, gunning straight for the San Ignacio Dam. If they got there, if they cracked that wall of concrete, a town of 15,000 would be underwater before anyone could blink, and the power grid for half the Southwest would go dark. I'm standing there on the tarmac at Redstone Air Base, watching the chaos unfold, the kind of scene where everyone's moving but nobody's thinking. F-22s were already up, screaming across the sky, but the word came back fast they were useless. Enemy jammers were locking them out, turning million-dollar jets into blind bats, and the canyon's twists were too tight for their speed. Down on the ridge, a Marine recon team was watching it all go down, their voice crackling over the radio, tight, clipped, like they were chewing on gravel. It's over. They're 7 minutes out. No way we stop this. Nobody looked at the far end of the flight line, where an old A-10 Thunderbolt II sat under a tarp, collecting dust like a forgotten relic. Nobody, except me, Sarah Kane, the woman in faded coveralls, grease on my knuckles, badge swinging loose around my neck. To them, I was just another wrench-turner, a civilian contractor who kept the jets from falling apart. They didn't know my call sign was Raven 7. They didn't know I used to own the sky. This is the story of how a woman and her Warthog said hell no to impossible odds, and how the desert remembered my name. If you're the kind of person who gets a kick out of low-flying thunder, pilots who don't quit, and fights nobody else would take, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and let's roll. Where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. The desert doesn't talk much. It just sits there, humming, like it's been waiting for you to screw up since the dinosaurs checked out. Redstone was no different. Miles of baked earth, a runway shimmering in the heat, and hangars that looked like they'd been dropped here by mistake. Most evenings, the only thing moving was the heat haze and the slow shuffle of maintenance crews heading back to base before the sun dipped behind the mesas. That's where I fit in, blending into the rhythm. Just another face in coveralls, my hands always dirty, my eyes always on my clipboard. Sarah Kane, tech, nothing special. No rank, no patch, no reason for anyone to give me a second glance. That's how I wanted it. The A-10 in Hangar 5 wasn't much to look at either. Squat, ugly, built like a tank with wings, it wasn't the kind of jet that got you a poster at an air show. The young hotshots, the ones strutting around in flight suits, they'd walk right past it, talking about their F-35s, their stealth, their speed. The Warthog didn't care about any of that. It was made to take a beating and dish one out, to fly low where the fancy jets wouldn't dare. I knew every rivet on that bird, every dent in its skin, every scar from missions nobody talked about anymore. I hadn't flown in years, not since I walked into a colonel's office and said, "I'm done up there." He didn't argue. The Air Force loves its paperwork, and mine said I was a ghost, so I stayed one fixing jets, keeping my head down, my past locked tight. Then the siren screamed. It started high, sharp, like a knife in your ear, then dropped low, heavy, the kind of sound that makes your stomach twist. I stopped dead on the tarmac. Across the ramp, pilots froze mid-sentence, tools hit the ground, and every head turned toward the tower. The PA crackled, the voice slicing through the heat. Hostile convoy in Coyote's Jaw Pass. Armored vehicles, electronic countermeasures, targeting San Ignacio Dam. 6 minutes to impact. All close air support, scramble now. The base exploded into motion, ground crews sprinting for shelters, pilots racing for their jets, the air thick with shouted orders, and the whine of engines spooling up. I didn't move, just stood there, staring at the canyon's jagged outline on the horizon. I knew Coyote's jaw, knew its tight turns, its walls that could turn a bad decision into a fireball. The F-22s were fast, sure, but they'd be flying blind, and drones wouldn't cut through the jamming. The radio hissed with the Marine recon team's voice, sharp with frustration. "This is Recon Bravo. Negative on Raptor support. Jammers are too strong. You've got one shot before they're at the dam." A young crew chief, barely old enough to shave, yelled toward the tower. "Who's checked out on the hog?" Silence. Nobody stepped up. The A-10 wasn't sexy, wasn't anybody's first choice. I felt the words slip out before I could stop them. "I am." Heads turned, eyes narrowing, like I'd just said I could walk on water. The crew chief blinked, confused. "Ma'am, are you even rated to?" I flipped my badge up, the one nobody ever read past the first line. Sarah Kane, former 355th Fighter Wing, call sign Raven 7. The name hit like a dropped socket. An older mechanic, gray creeping into his beard, actually fumbled his wrench. "No way. Her." The tower's voice cut through, firm but skeptical. "Kane, you're not cleared to fly." I didn't look at him, just kept my eyes on the canyon. "Your Raptors can't make that turn. Your drones can't beat that jamming. That hog in Hangar 5? She can. And so can I." A beat of static. Then the tower came back, voice steady now. "Crew her. Load high-explosive incendiaries, AGM-65s, full GU, 8 drum. Kane, you get one run. Don't screw it up." The hangar turned into a hive, ammo belts clanking, rockets snapping onto the wings, the GU-8's massive drums spinning slow, each shell the size of a beer bottle. I walked to the hog, my steps cutting through the noise like a knife. I stopped by the nose, where a faded shark's mouth grinned under a layer of dust. My fingers brushed it clean, revealing a scratch from a mission over Kandahar nobody asked about anymore. "All right, old friend," I whispered, hand flat against the metal. "Let's dance one more time." I climbed the ladder, the rungs cold and familiar under my boots. The cockpit seat was hard, unyielding, like it remembered me. Harness clicked in, throttle slid under my palm, and the engines growled to life, a low rumble that shook my chest. Raven 7, tower. Cleared for immediate taxi. Coyote's jaw ingress. "Good hunting." I eased the throttles forward, the hog rolling out, heavy and mean. Over the radio, the Marine commander muttered, almost to himself, "If she's really Raven 7, we might just have a chance." The runway blurred beneath me, and in seconds, the desert dropped away. I kept the climb. Shallow altitude was for cowards. The hog was built for the dirt, for skimming treetops, for getting in the enemy's face. I pushed her forward, just enough to keep her steady, the canyon's jagged edges clawing at the sky ahead. The radio crackled. "Raven 7, you're 30 seconds from canyon ingress. Convoys in 2 columns, 8 vehicles total, jammers in the middle. Hit the jammers first, then clean up with guns." I glanced at the moving map, plotting my line. "Copy. What's between them and the dam?" A pause, then the Marine's voice, grim. "Nothing. They hit the spillway, it's over." The clock read 6 minutes. No room for mistakes. I slid the hog under the first ridge, the canyon walls closing in, the engine's roar bouncing back like a heartbeat. The air shifted, tight and heavy, the kind of place where one bad move ends you. The pod camera flickered, picking up heat signatures faint at first, then sharp, angry blips. They were close. "Raven 7, be advised, ECM's degrading our feed. You're on your own in 10 seconds. I nodded to nobody. Understood. The hog didn't need babysitting. I rounded a bend, and there they were, 2 columns of armor grinding through the pass, disciplined, tight, like a snake coiling for a strike. Jammer trucks squatted in the center, antennas twitching, spitting static that choked the air. Above them, sparks of light SAM teams on the escort vehicles, waiting for me. I slid the targeting cursor over the lead jammer, the brain of their whole operation. One good hit, and they'd be blind. The Maverick locked, a clean tone humming in my headset. "Target 1, good tone." I fired. The missile screamed off the rail, disappearing around a curve. A second later, the canyon lit up, flame and dust exploding as the jammer truck blew apart, the shockwave rattling my canopy like a punch. The convoy scattered, vehicles swerving, escorts spraying tracer fire into the sky. I dropped the hog's nose, the GU-8's pipper kissing an armored carrier trying to break formation. I squeezed the trigger, and the cannon didn't just fire, it roared, 7 barrels spinning into a blur, shredding the carrier into scrap. The canyon shook, rocks tumbling, but the enemy wasn't done. The second jammer truck gunned it, weaving between boulders, its escorts lighting up the air with green and red streaks. A missile warning screamed, "Heat seeker, close." I yanked the hog left, dumping flares, the missile streaking past and cratering the canyon wall. My radar warning receiver was lit like a Christmas tree, threats everywhere. I rolled low, wingtips skimming the rock, coaxing the hog through the turns like a rider on a spooked horse. The second jammer was still moving, driver pushing it hard, escorts desperate. I thumped to my last Maverick. Lock on, I muttered and fired. The missile hugged the canyon floor, slamming into the truck's rear. The blast flipped it end over end, a fireball painting the walls orange. My RWR went quiet. The jamming was gone. I'd cracked their spine. Raven 7, this is Recon Bravo. The Marine's voice cut in, steadier now. We see your work. Finish it. I banked hard, lining up on the convoy's remains. The GAU-8 growled again, tearing through armor like a hot knife. Below, the enemy scrambled, their discipline breaking. One of the SAM teams fired wild, a desperate shot. I rolled, flares popping, the missile missing by inches. Not today, I hissed, swinging the pipper over their position. The cannon answered, and the ridge they'd been hiding on turned to dust. The convoy was done, but I wasn't out yet. My left engine light flared red oil pressure tanking. Then another alarm hydraulics bleeding out. The hog was tough, but she was hurting. Raven 7, base command, the tower snapped. You're losing systems. Climb to egress route Bravo. I shook my head. Negative. That puts me over open ground, no cover. I'm taking the river slit. A pause then, that's a death trap, Kane. I didn't answer, just dropped lower, the canyon scar of a riverbed opening ahead. It was narrow, twisted, a pilot's nightmare, but it had shaved 2 minutes off my exit. 2 minutes I didn't have. The river slit was barely wide enough for the hog's wings. Walls pressed in, shadows swallowing the light, crosswinds trying to slam me into the rock. I flew by feel, a touch of rudder, a nudge of the stick, throttle dancing to keep her steady. The gauges weren't lying left, engine dying, hydraulics in the red. Raven 7, unknown heat signature at 3 o'clock low, the tower warned. Possible manpads. I dropped lower, skimming the dry riverbed, praying the terrain would hide me. A plume of smoke curled up from the Bonkow missile. I yanked left, flares bursting, the missile's wake shaking the hog as it missed. Then I saw a flatbed truck in a clearing, tarp yanked back, a twin-barrel autocannon staring me down. An ambush. I didn't think, just acted, sliding the pipper over the truck and letting the GAU-8 rip. The cannon's roar drowned everything, the truck and its crew vanishing in a storm of fire and metal. But the hog was shaking now, a deep shudder that said she couldn't take much more. Raven 7, egress point in 60 seconds, the tower said. Emergency crews on standby. I didn't reply, my eyes locked on the final twist of the slit. One last turn, and the desert opened up, the base shimmering in the distance. But the hog was falling on sluggish, oil smell burning my nose. Raven 7, telemetry shows critical systems failure. The tower said, urgent now. Eject, Kane. That's an order. I stared at the ejection handle, the yellow and black stripes mocking me. Eject, and the hog would crash, a heap of scrap in the sand. Negative, I said, voice flat. I'm bringing her home. The last 5 miles were a fight. I kept her low, balancing speed and control, the runway growing closer, a silver line in the haze. Crosswinds hit at 10 knots, forcing me to crab the hog in. Minimal flaps, the tower advised. Avoid stall. I smirked. Been here before. At 2 miles, I cut the left engine. It was dead weight now. The hog lurched, but I corrected, rudder steady. The runway markers came into view, fire trucks lining the edges, medics waiting, pilots watching like they'd seen a ghost. Raven 7, cleared for immediate, the tower said. Runway foamed. I cut the right engine at half a mile, the hog gliding now, heavy, sinking fast. I pulled the nose up, speed bleeding off, 190 knots, too fast but no choice. The belly hit the tarmac hard, sparks flying, metal screaming as we skidded through foam and smoke. I held the stick, kept her straight, the nose dipping, then catching. The grinding stopped, and the world went quiet. I popped the canopy, cool air hitting my face. I unstrapped, climbed onto the wing, and dropped to the ground, my hand lingering on the hog's scorched skin. You held up, I whispered. So did I. The Marine commander's voice came over the radio, warm, almost grinning. Raven 7, the dam's safe. You pulled it off. I looked toward the horizon, where San Ignacio stood untouched, gleaming in the dusk. Fire crews jogged up, medics trailing with stretchers I didn't need. I waved them off, my boots steady on the tarmac. A crowd had gathered, mechanics, pilots, even the cooks, all staring like I'd just walked out of a myth. The base commander strode over, his face a mix of irritation and something else, respect, maybe. You ignored a direct order, he said, voice low. I didn't stop walking. So did that convoy. He almost smiled. You saved the dam, the town, thousands of lives. I'll handle the paperwork. I glanced at the crowd, at a young pilot, barely 22, staring like he was trying to burn the moment into his brain, the grease on my gloves, the sweat on my flight suit, the way I carried my helmet. They didn't know who you were, the commander said, following my gaze. But the enemy did. They built that whole ambush to keep you out. They knew, Raven 7. I stopped, my jaw tightening. Then they should have known I don't miss. He nodded, slow. I'm putting you back on active reserve. Full flight clearance. I didn't ask for that, didn't want it, but I could already hear the next call, the sirens, the voices, the question. Is Raven 7 coming? I looked at the hog, towed toward the hangar, foam dripping, rivets black with soot. What if I want to stay in the shadows? I asked. He didn't blink. Then don't answer. I walked to the locker bay, unzipped my flight suit, the weight of it falling away. Under a pile of coveralls was a patch I hadn't touched in years, a black raven over a cracked star. I slid it into my pocket, the fabric warm against my chest. Outside, the air had changed, alive, like the base itself was watching me. A technician nodded as I passed, not a quick glance, but the kind that says, I know you now. The intercom crackled. Raven 7, welcome home. I stopped, let the words sink in, not as a call sign, but as something I'd earned back. The smile wasn't for the crowd or the commander, it was for the hog, for the dam still standing, for the sky that had carried me through. The ghosts I'd carried for years weren't haunting me anymore. They were flying with me. So here's the thing, what do you think? Was I right to ignore the order, to risk the hog, to bring her home instead of punching out? Or should I have played it safe, followed the book, let the jet crash? Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done? And if you've got a story about standing your ground, about beating the odds, share it. Let's keep this fire burning.